Today's lesson is about comparing and ordering decimals, and we'll be using place value to do that. So I'm going to teach you a very easy strategy on how to compare decimal numbers by place value. For this lesson, you will need a piece of paper and something to write with, so pause the video now and go get a piece of paper and something to write with. So there's 3 steps that I want you to write down on how to compare decimals. Step 1 is line up and stack the decimals. Step 2, fill in any gaps with zeros. And then step 3 is compare starting at the left, which is going to be our greatest place value. And if you haven't already, pause the video right now and write it down. Write these 3 steps down. So let's take a look at a few examples. So here's our first example. So pause the video and write this down on your paper. And our goal here is that we're going to put either the less than, greater than, or equal to sign into the red box. So we need to compare these numbers. To do that, we're going to use the steps that we talked about before. So our first step says to line up and stack the decimals. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 numbers and stack them up, lining up the decimals. So first I'm going to do this one. I'm going to rewrite it. So 9 and 97 hundredths. And then I'm going to write this one right underneath, lining up the decimals. So to do that, I'm actually going to write my decimal first, and then I look over here, my 9's on that side. And then I'm going to write these over here, 798. So 798. So that's step 1. Step 2 says to fill in any gaps with zeros. What I'm talking about there is here, there's nothing in this. There's nothing to line up with this 8. So that's a gap that we're going to fill in with a 0. So that's step 2. And quick reminder, you should be writing this as well. So pause the video and get caught up if you need to. And now step 3 says that we're going to compare starting at the left. So when I'm looking at these, my left is all the way over here. So I'm actually going to be starting right here looking at these numbers. So draw an arrow underneath them, pointing at them. So when I look at both of these numbers, I notice that they're equal. So I'm going to write an equal sign. Then I'm going to move over, and now I'm going to be looking at these 2 numbers. So I'm looking at these 2 numbers now. And when I'm looking at these 2 numbers, I know that the 9 is greater. So I'm going to circle that 9. And as soon as you find a difference, you can stop there. So because this 9 was greater than that 7, I can go ahead and stop. I know that this right here is the greater number. Now I just need to think about which one of these to use. Well, I like to think about a Pac-Man. And the Pac-Man needs to be eating the greater number. What we found out was this one. So we need this Pac-Man to come down so that he's eating the 9 and 97 hundredths. He's eating the greater number. And that's our final answer. Okay, now here's our second example. So make sure you pause the video and write this down. If you're not writing it down, you will not remember it. Okay, let's go through the steps. It says line up and stack the decimals. So that's our first step. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this number right here and rewrite it. So 0 and 385 thousandths. And you should be doing the same on your paper. Now I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to write it underneath down here, making sure the decimals are lined up. That's what's important here. The decimals need to be lined up, and if the decimals line up, it lines all the other numbers up for you. So I've got my decimals lined up. Now I have a 4 here and a 0 on this side. And now we can go to step 2. We're going to fill in the gaps with zeros. And remember, you can always pause the video if I'm going too quickly. So the gaps that we're talking about are here. Notice there's numbers above but nothing underneath. So these are the gaps that we're talking about. So I have a gap here I can fill in with a 0, and a gap here in the thousandths place I can fill in with a 0. And then our third step is compare starting at the left. So we're going to go all the way to the left, which is going to be here in the ones place this time. Draw an arrow underneath, and I notice they're both zeros, so I'm going to write an equal sign. Then I can slide over, and now I'm looking at this spot. And there I notice that the 4 is greater than the 3. So I'm going to circle the 4 because it's greater. And I can stop right there. I don't have to go any further. Now I know that this number right here is the greater number. So I just locate that number back up here in the original problem. Here it is. So I just need to make sure I use the right symbol, like pretend it's a Pac-Man, that it's eating this number right here. Our Pac-Man needs to be eating this number. So that means I'm going to bring this one over, and that's the correct symbol to get our answer. And here's our final example. Now I want you to pause the video and I want you to try this one on your own. Actually do the 3 steps on your paper and try on your own, and then unpause to check your answer. Step 1 was line up the numbers, stacking the decimals. Step 2 said fill in gaps with zeros, but we didn't have any this time. Step 3, compare starting at the left. The hundreds place was equal though, so we moved over, and the tens place was equal. We moved over again, and the ones place was equal too. Finally, in the tens place, we found the 7 was greater, which told us that entire number was greater. That means the symbol goes that direction.